we have staff call Colin every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 1. So Mark and I were on that just before this. So yeah, it was actually 3 to 4. So it would have been within the last 24 hours, 3 to 4 my time, and we're doing this 2 to 3 my time. So yeah, it's been twice with all you fun folks within the last 24 hours. This is going to be exciting, everybody, because there's nothing that I like more than some of the things that Colin's done. And I'm real excited to get updates on just generally before we started that we were together in 2019. So 6.5 years or so ago. And we have no formal format here, and we don't have a presentation, I don't think, that Colin's going to do. So we're just going to sit here and talk
Yeah.
together.
No, I totally have something queued up, Wayne.
Very cool. And so why don't we start, though, because there's going to be people watching this that didn't see the first time that we were together. Take us back as far back, maybe, even to your childhood, however much you want for the next 5 minutes or so, and tell us about yourself.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Colin Lennox, CEO of Eco Islands LLC in Altoona, Pennsylvania. So the business then, we build self-organizing wetland bioreactors. What is that? It's a wetland in a box. That's what the presentation is going to be, asking questions like, what is a wetland? How does it work? What else could be a wetland? How you twist terminology and definitions in science to create new things. Dad was a microbiologist. He taught for Penn State. So I've been grown up and quite steeped. Thanks, Mark. Steeped in, in the lab, and then also getting out and about. Dad had his Eagle, and I got mine in '96 from Boy Scouts, Eagle Scout. Traipsing around a lot in the woods. And when I finally got my what together and stopped, and started to become an adult and did well in college after the 5th time, I went straight from school and got into building wetlands in a box. Not directly. There are these things called biohaven floating islands. I think the patents are now lapsed. It was Bruce Cania. I started off out of college like, well, what am I going to do? And I was like, hey, there's these floating island things. That's landscaping and it's biology. That sounds fun. So I got in with him for a little while. The business model, I couldn't make it work for that particular material and that application of these floating wetland technologies. And although they work, there are things that I like. Being made out of a easy to pick apart plastic was a kind of a bit of a downside for the initial material they were using. So that there were some downsides of that, but I took the basic ideas and applied them then to mining reclamation here in Pennsylvania. So iron, aluminum, manganese, like that sulfur water you hear about, but really looking at it from a systems and a microbiological perspective. And we ended up having some real great successes and 1 or 2 real epic flops too, for, sometimes getting out over my skis or not knowing everything about nature. Like, who does that? The point of these wetlands is nobody's ever built them before. I ended up getting the patents on them, this style, and getting really interesting results that don't necessarily work on all sites. Was what ended up happening with manganese oxides. And I'll talk more about it here in my presentation. But that made the mining community, it's kind of tough, when it's the old ways work. So why change them? Is, it's stable. It's something a coal mining company can predicate a business model on with their reclamation. So there wasn't really a lot of push to really move anything forward. And I'm a much better scientist than I am a business person. If I'd just gone after certain kinds of wastewaters versus what everybody was asking for, things might have been different. So been kind of migrating in some ways back to originally the floating islands were nutrients, mining is those mining impacts, and now I'm floating. No pun intended. We're moving because if you know mining and you know aquaculture cycling, you have a bent for science fiction. I've been moving into aerospace over the last 7 years, and so one of the main things that we're working on right now is how to use self-organizing wetland bioreactors, or SOBs is what I call them, for cycling and processing wastewater and atmosphere in closed life support systems, called a BLIS, or a biological life support system, on like the ISS or the moon or Mars or a seastead out in the middle of the ocean, or an Arctic system, or something like a desert environment with Arcosanti, just as an example. Biosphere 2, where I went out there last year. So the presentation I'm going to give, I gave at Biosphere 2 last year at the Analog Astronaut Conference. I'll talk a little bit about, I'll do some of my slides. And then this presentation was to be an introductory for the team that I work with, called Arcology Solutions. And it's an open source, not for profit. We're all about, my God, save yourselves. Accessible technologies that can be harnessed by people with some technological access, like a 3D printer it's a nice to have. It's not a showstopper. But basic tools, things that, preppers talk about, but with an intention that is to save everybody and not just hold the line, so to speak. That's what I've been doing for the last 16 years, essentially. So from college in 2009 till today, getting in with the NASA All Working Groups papers, not really going after any grants. There isn't a whole lot of money out there for that. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of money out there for anything other than war right now. But how about I talk about something a little bit more uplifting, no pun intended, and we'll get into Arcology Solutions. Is that all right, Wayne?
That sounds good. You're awesome. Tell people a little bit about, for you, and maybe it's in your presentation. If it is, don't repeat it. But the biosphere, just generally, people have probably heard of it, but probably very few have ever been there. So,
sure. Biosphere 2, built in the mid 80s at a cost of $100 million. It was some gentleman out of Silicon Valley, I can't remember his name, put the money up. And the Biospherians, which are this small group of adventurers, and they weren't like actual PhDs, which is a little surprising. They were people who were really passionate about what they did. And they went around the world and they gathered hundreds of species of plants, and they put it in a big biodome. So Epcot Center, essentially. And that's out north of Tucson, about 45 minutes. And the original unit, called the SAM unit, that was built there, is also being upgraded by a gentleman by the name of Kai Statz, who is a filmmaker, adventurer, and researcher, working in the same style field of, you hear bioregenerative a lot. It's a wordy way of saying upcycling. But essentially, we're all working in the same field, all of us, really. I mean, when you consider that you're looking for outputs, you've got inputs, and whether you make money or not is dependent on the mission. But then that's determined by your structure, the business and the like. So that's Biosphere 2, but it's huge. It's 3.84 acres or something like that, under glass. That has these two in the desert, which means it gets really hot and it moves a lot of air. So it's got these two giant lung-like diaphragms that are like 150 feet wide each, that allow for the flux of atmosphere to move through the facility so that it breathes. So it's, as it heats up in the day, because if in a sealed environment, if you don't do that, all the air is going to squeeze out through, even though you've got this closed system, it's still 1% atmospheric leak, you know. So you would still just end up squeezing everything out, and you'd end up hearing a whistling, and there'd be this super fast draft going in this one little spot that you didn't get properly sealed. But the point is not to have an atmospheric loss, only moving it backwards and forwards so that it is kind of breathing. I mean, it's a neat idea. It's not the way I'd have done it, or we're planning to do. Um, but those are the components, and it is an impressive facility. The campus that they've got there is really cool. I had a blast last year. So many neat people. If anybody's interested, it's the Analog Astronaut Conference 26. I think tickets are like $950 for your own room. Everything's covered for 3 days. Just got to get yourself there. Little pricey for a conference, I thought, but just wow, what a neat crowd. Like the Cody's lab dude, Cody was there last year. A whole bunch of people from ESA, a bunch of NASA space doctors. That's how I met Colonel Jenny Hesterman last year, who also went to Penn State. Jenny's great. Just a really neat crowd. And they were running what's called the world's largest analog. So a space analog is something kind of like a biodome or biosphere, where you are running missions where people go in and essentially, pretend, so to speak, but they've got missions that they are on another planet. The idea being that you can elucidate the human factors of people going on missions. And there's like 14 or 15 of them right now. And the world's largest analog, the idea was that everybody will get on to the same commo at the same time, and to be able to test linkages across the whole planet, using Starlink. So technologically, it's pretty sophisticated. The analog I've been working at is the Mars Desert Research Station outside of Hanksville, Utah, which is really neat. We just upgraded the solar array out there, myself and a friend of mine, Rich Flarin, here in town. Rich is the electrician. I just hold screwdrivers. I don't really touch electricity. He did all the work. He's got a PhD in physics. So yeah, he's the brain when it comes to the solar, and I do the water, so we can build infrastructure grids that are water and electric, and that kind of starts off everything. Anyway, so MDRS is one of these analogs. It's a neat place. Check it out. It's through the Mars Society. And that was the Analog Astronaut Conference that was held at Biosphere 2 last year. And then I'll give that presentation here. It's a really neat place, but it's kind of, they run tours, but not a lot of them. So yeah, it's just a little exclusive, but beautiful place to check. That was that good enough, Wayne? Was that enough of an explanation?
Right. No, that was perfect. So just go ahead and into the presentation now. It'll be awesome. Thanks, man.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so let's see. We should have slide number 13. Let me just. Okay, same moi. That's me using my thermal extrusion welder to build one of the newest versions of the our SOBs. So this was done out in Livingston, Montana, 2 years ago, and welding them outside at the place called the Tesla Building in Livingston. Cute little town. It's the gateway to Yellowstone, and they film a lot of cowboy movies there. So you're actually more likely to see actual stars out there. It's kind of cool. But the question is, wetlands. Well, just to get to the basic science, like this is the 6th grade level. Well, maybe call it the 9th grade level. So what is a wetland? It holds water most of the time. Water moves through it. High surface area to volume, high biomass to volume. That's the key. They're all important, but that's the one that really has, outweighs the others. And it cycles matter and energy. Once again, this is a wetland that essentially, not that that's its job. It's just what it does. It cycles matter and energy lots of ways, both biotic and abiotic. So through living means and through non-living means. Those non-living could be, geochemical, Winogradsky effects, electrical, thermal. There's a lot of just basic water, gravity settling. There's a lot of abiotic effects, and that's just the natural environment. Um, and then the wetland is also self-organized by what's called Gibbs free energy, or and based off of the prevailing atmosphere. And I'll get into Gibbs free energy, but like got the Gibbs brothers there, the Bee Gees. I was spelled the same way. So next question then. Okay, so that's a wetland. And these are my definitions, but this is how they function. So what is a bioreactor? Now, does predictable and reproducible work. And I do apologize. I'm actually reading from slides. I'm that guy, but it just sometimes it's easiest to do it this way. It is a biological engine. That's bioreactor, ruled by the law of conservation of mass and energy, right? Just got to put it down on a basic level that this is still a physical process. Even if it's catalyzed, these reactions are catalyzed, producing useful byproducts. The term there is BISRU. That's a biological in situ resource utilization. So ISRU would be the abiotic factors that would allow, say, on Mars to go and pull a bunch of soil, leach off all the perchlorate in the soil. Thinking the Martian, Mark Watney, what he had to go through. He had to deal with perchlorates. Granted, that's a fictional book, but we know they are there. And it's nasty stuff, real nasty. Can also be used as jet fuel or propellant. But the BISRU then would be using biology to process the regolith, the dirt that you're getting off the ground. You could use that on the moon, pretty much anywhere you go. If you wanted a BISRU, you're way up from nothing to a larger habitat. You got to use what's there because you're not getting any more. So that's why there's such a focus. Well, in NASA right now, there's not a budget for it. So there hasn't been a focus on BISRU in over like 15 years. Everybody dropped the ball. It was all about just getting up out of the atmosphere. And then nobody thinks about what we do afterwards. It's just on a call with a buddy of mine about that. Dr. Daniel Tompkins, he's one of my coworkers. His big thing is bioplastics, and he is a plant pathologist. So you meet a lot of cool people in the aerospace field. So anyway, natural wetlands are self-selecting and organizing, which is also called natural attenuation, which is a term that DEP or EPA used. It was on their website a long time ago, and who knows if it's still up now in this current administration. They take down everything that. Anyway, and constructed or manufactured wetlands are the conscious selection of environments to cycle matter and energy. So a constructed wetland would be like a holding pond with limestone in it for acid mine drainage remediation, with channels and a piping manifold that's been buried under your number 4 cobble sizes of and number 2 and number 4 of calcium carbonate limestone, the highest purity you can get shipped in depending on your shipping prices, right? That's a constructed wetland. They're big, and when they fail, they're very difficult to fix. It's not that like it's that difficult. I mean, you got to get a guy out there with a machine that's large enough to do the job. And how many, that's $1,000 or $2,000 a day. And, if they got to be out there for a week or two, with 2 people, one there for watching the, just safety, right? Too deep. But there's upsides and there's downsides. One of those main downsides in constructed wetlands versus what I do is manufactured wetlands, is that you don't have an opportunity to rarefy the materials that are coming out. So in a constructed wetland, if it's using, say, something like caustic soda as the alkalinity amendment in an acid mine drainage situation, you get this big heterogeneous muck that all comes out together, and it just sits there as a sludge until you dewater the pond in 20 years, leave everything there, or take the mud somewhere else, or cover it over if you do get it dry enough. And you still have to build another one somewhere else, because the process, mine drainage can go on for hundreds of years. If you think of Rio Tinto, the river itself, not the company, that's been thousands of years that it's been, weeping iron. That's why they call it the Red River. And but other sites can be like, maybe 20, 30 years, a generation or two, and they will naturally attenuate on their own. But in the process, you're polluting all the water downstream. So that's why you got to clean up the water, right? They're mandated to do it by the Clean Water Act of 70 and 77. As well as other local, restrictions, and different states are different for what they're actually allowing for. We're filthy with water here in Pennsylvania, but you go out west and man, obviously people, Wayne, I seem to recall having a conversation about selenium one time. And that was many years ago. So, yeah, moving on. So we build manufactured wetlands, and we can rarefy, or we can valorize the materials that are coming through, because we can essentially split out the iron aluminum from the manganese and the rare earths, which co-precipitate. So moving forward, and I can talk more about that later on, but I got a lot to cover here. So bioreactors, specific and by definition, these are just examples of natural wetland. Obviously, just spent 2 slides on that. But also things that could be considered wetlands are methane digesters, reclamation ponds, fish tanks. Well, kind of technically, if you want to stretch it a little bit, greenhouses, wastewater treatment plants, wine and beer vats. In that case, instead of a flow-through reactor, they are a batch reactor. So whether that's one of those primary definitions. All wetlands, mysobes, the wastewater treatment plants, they're flow-through reactors where you have stages of treatment where the water, as it passes through, gets continually cleaner. It's not a very scientific definition, but you get the idea. Versus wine and beer vats, where everything happens in one shot. Now, sure, you've got CO2 coming off, and you may add some more sugar or something to increase your alcohol content, but it's still a single batch. But then also, kind of by definition, if it is a wetland and it is self-organizing and it's capable of reproduction and it's got a heterogeneous a whole bunch of different biology going on, then by that definition, people, plants, box turtles, and my dog River, who's you can see right there in a picture, and she does not see that turtle, by the way, that's to the bottom left of that picture. She never did see that turtle. He blended in so well. That's in the little grove up at the top of the hill behind my house. Oh, and then by the way, so the intern Nick 6'7", so that gives you an idea of how big that box is. That's a 5x10. That is low pH iron oxidation. I think we got a world record on that one. That was pulling 800 grams per cubic meter a day of iron. Dr. Athena Chen used this system Dr. Athena Chen, during her getting her PhD. And she was able to determine that the metals in there were schwertmanite, goethite, and jarosite. And that they were zoned between each one of those 3 chambers or vaults, and that it was the pH was dropping from like a 3.2 to a 2.8 by the time it got out. So it was an acid producing function, because acid mine drainage, as the iron is oxidizing, it's an acid producing process, molar wise. So acidity continues to drop, so that there is what we were looking for is there a bottom. And I think the lowest I saw was about a 2.7. So it begs the question, is there a self-modulation by the biofilm that will slow their own metabolism to keep themselves in a more, since they're already acidophiles, loving acid-like environments, because it gives them a metabolic advantage, because nothing else can live. So, it's just where there is a way, and those are, I can't remember if they're bacteria or archaea, but that's a really, really super old reaction. I mean, that, like, we're talking about metabolisms there that have been around for hundreds of millions, if not billions of years of Earth's biogeochemical history here. So it's neat to be able to look at all the different layers and levels and get the experiences that you need to eventually get to the point where you can take regolith off the ground on Mars and turn it into something useful, make steel girders out of it. So moving on. So what is biofilm? So, because, bioreactors. So this is a mix of microbes and their secreted colloids. Mayonnaise is a colloid. So they're all living in this basically kind of a mayonnaise. And it remains generally stable in mass, population, diversity, and density. So if it's got enough surface area to attach to as the water is passing by and it doesn't get knocked off, it just continues to grow and do its thing. And, it's metabolizing and doing work for peanuts, essentially, because it's just remaining and living in this stable environment. And it creates a stabilizing effect to that environment too. So it's self-reinforcing. So protects the microbes producing the film. That's the what's called EPS, that colloid. It's extra polysaccharidal matrix, the mayonnaise, fancy term for the mayonnaise. So the main components in natural cycling throughout history, when we die, something's going to break us down. It's microbes, biofilm. Unless the coyotes get to you first. But it's also media for chemical signaling, structural support, refuge, desiccation protection, so from drying out, and also hosts complex redox reactions. This is where it starts getting a little. We're going to go ahead and dive in. So I don't know how much we're going to dive in here, but so this is what's called the redox ladder. It's measured in voltage. You use a simple ORP probe, 20, 30 bucks. You can buy them online. And what they're basically telling you is whether oxygen or whether the water environment that you are working in is primarily oxidizing, aka aerobic, or whether it's anoxic or anaerobic. So you, me, everybody who's walking around, all multicellular organisms are aerobic because the energy that is released during our metabolic triplets, ATP to NADH, what's called the Krebs cycle, is very efficient energy-wise. All the way down to negative 450, and this is in DC. I've been learning electromechanical or bioelectrical effects here in the lab. But this negative 450 is methane. And so in a system where it's open air, well mixed like an open pond, and then you run it into a pipe, kind of like a soap, like the things that I build, the oxygen gets chewed up really fast. But okay, so what? So we're no longer aerobic. So we're going to go to anoxic. And limnology, by the way, this is essentially what's called the Winogradsky effect, and the study of limnology, or lentic and lotic freshwater environments on continents. That's limnology. I love that class. Is probably the best, easiest way to learn real fast about what I'm talking about. Just pick up a beginner's book on limnology, and it'll get you most of what you need, just for your own edification. But so after you chew up all the oxygen, well, what's next? It's nitrogen. Your nitrates. Everybody knows that if you don't incorporate or inject your cow shit slurry into the ground, you're going to lose most of your nitrogen to denitrification. It'll go to an N2 within a first day or two. So you have to stabilize it either in a water column of some kind or through the microbes that are in the fields, right? So knowing, and one of the reasons they do that is why nitrogen, nitrate, nitrite, nitrogen gas then, and then ammonia, ammonium for NH3 and NH4 is because they provide a lot of energy and in this case, it's the oxygens. I mean, NO3, right? So they become what's called is your terminal electron acceptor, and that's your off gassing. That's how you get the CO2 out of your system, so you don't die. The oxygen is not to. It's we'll talk about the triplets in a moment, but the idea here is that if you go from the most energetic to the least energetic, and for instance, oxic is 32 ATP, where methanic is only it's either 4 or 8 ATP produced, because they're still using adenosine triphosphate, which that's the energy, that's that redox couplet that powers all life on the planet. And there are different metabolisms that are older or newer, and some more efficient, but they all still exist, and they're ubiquitous throughout the microbial world, right? So if you have a handful of dirt, you're going to have a good chance, at least, it's not a guarantee. But you go outside and you pick up, take one shovelful, and you're going to have microbes for every single one of those metabolic pathways in that shovelful. And that's important because that means that if you have a mine drainage treatment system that you intentionally want it to go anoxic or anaerobic, you can get down to something like the sulfate reducers. Now sulfate, or SO, in this case, SO4/2, and then the other side of that is hydrogen sulfide. That's the rotten egg smell. But if you can successfully manipulate or reduce sulfate, drive off the hydrogen sulfide is the acid in acid mine drainage. In this case, you're using the hydrogen and that redox couplet to go ahead and drive off, or excuse me, the sulfur to grab and drive off because it volatilizes. That's why it stinks and you can smell it. And it's incredibly dangerous stuff. Too. Hydrogen sulfide is real nasty. But what it does is classically mined drainage will add alkalinity. But if you know how to safely use sulfate reduction, you don't add alkalinity, which increases the electroconductivity and the solutes within the load of water. You remove the acid, which also gives you the pH adjustment that you need to drive off things that will oxidize, like your iron, aluminum, and manganese. But you've also reduced or lessened the amount of acid. In this case, there's H plus or H plus, yeah. Essentially it's their hydronium ions. That is acid. That is the acidity component. When you think about pH, it's H plus and OH negative, and hydroxyl is base. That's the alkaline side. That's the 7 to 14. So balancing those two out when they combine is H2O. And water itself is slightly polar. So it's just like actually a 6.8 or something like that pH, pure water. Anyway, sorry guys, I'm getting really into the weeds on this one, but that one right there allows you to manipulate your pH biologically, right? So that one could be huge by itself. And then you go down another layer, then you got the methanogens. So now you got energy production, all within the steps. And these are all the bioavailable ones. So understanding that this thing even existed took me a really long time, but it's super basic electrical probes that you can use to be able to determine what's going on. But knowing that they do this in a cascade and doing it intentionally allows you to be able to manipulate regolith processing or basic biomining that we use here on planet Earth for, 10, 20, 30 something percent of, say, copper. It might be less than that. I'm not sure. But that gets you into the biomining. Okay, so the Winogradsky column then is essentially just a visual representation that's been around for 120 years of what I just said. So you take a whole bunch of pond muck and you put it into a column and you let it just sit there, it'll self-organize itself based off of the redox, where you'll have sulfate reducers producing hydrogen sulfide and then being able to migrate but self-organize into different layers that you can clearly see within these columns. So what I do, the self-organizing, the SOBs are Winogradsky columns that are put on their side and allow for off-gassing. Got the patents for it back in the day. Not that it did me a whole lot of good. That's another whole business thing. Let's see. So for the engineers in the room, in this context and application, SOBs are multi-fuel and multi-oxidant biological engines that self-organize to use each reductant and oxidizer sequentially based on the energy released and availability of the metabolic pathways. You got to make sure those microbes are actually in that shovel full of soil for them to be able to be flushed downstream until there's a point where their metabolism can take over. And they take over because all the rest of them have been used up upstream from them. So all the nitrogen would be either N2 or uptaken as biomass. There may not be any manganese in the water at all. So, that metabolism may be completely skipped over, which means it would leave the manganese in the water as it continues to flow through until it finally daylights out the back end of the system. This portion of the presentation was given to West Virginia Acid Mine Drainage Task Force 2 years ago. Crickets, speaking in front of 300 people, and I didn't get one question. I was kind of bummed. This was reviewed, but so this is the way that you can use pH adjustments and aerobic to anaerobic systems. Basically, do you open a valve or not on the SOBs? Do you get oxygen back into it at some point? You're going to aerate it. That allows you to then drop out the metals where you need them based off of their solubility tables. So I won't get too deep into that one. This is trophism. This is getting a little bit more now into the biosphere stuff where if you don't know what trophism is, it's that if you get 1,000 watts of energy landing on a bunch of plants and they grow crops, only a maximum of, and then you or I come up and we eat that, or a cow eats those crops, only 10% of the energy is ever transferred. And then if we eat the cow, then there's also only 10% of that energy is transferred. So from that 1,000 watts to start off with, you're down to 10 watts by going 2 trophic scales by the time we eat the cow. That's why it's very efficient for vegetarians and vegans, because they're eating further up the trophic scale. So knowing that that's a thing is really important when you're building enclosed life support systems, or just trying not to destroy the planet. These are some mining systems. That's aluminum coming out. This is these are old model SOBs. I'll never build those things again. It was dumb. It worked, but just an incredibly labor intensive process. And that's aluminum coming out right there. So this was a system north of here. And we redid those reclamation systems. But we just couldn't get the very last bit of the manganese out. So they had another company come in. I'm bummed about this, tore the whole thing out and just put in one of the old school systems, a constructed wetland, which will do the same thing that everything else does, which means it needs to be replaced in about 10 to 15 to 20 years. But hey, if you got enough alkalinity and you can fly a brick if you put enough power behind it. Doesn't mean it's elegant, but hey, you win some, you lose some. That's one of those deals. And we're still not sure why the manganese didn't fall out in this system. Those last 8 reactors that are all in a straight line, now those are the ones supposed to get the manganese. I mean, the water was beautiful. Everything else, 100% clean. There was no aluminum left over in this system. And that's almost impossible to do with a standard constructed wetland. If we had just ran with the aluminum and marketed on that, I would have more zeros in my bank account, I guess. Versus going after the manganese, which nobody can do consistently and easily. So jumping over to this is in Livingston, and this is the basic plumbing of one of the new systems. That is a wastewater treatment unit. It's an active septic tank essentially. You're degrading the fecal coliforms. You get a bunch of water from a local wetland and pour it in. And that's your inoculum essentially to this system. And obviously I've got to put on the other so that's Stuart standing there. There is a plate that has been welded in. So the picture that you're looking at, there's a big disc that goes over it. So that's the unfinished version. I just wanted to show you the detail on the plumbing. It's a pretty simple system. We don't use any PVC now. We went all to HDPE pipes for the whole system. That unit's plumbed with 2-inch. We were figuring maybe about 10 or 15 gallons a minute was all that we needed. So there wasn't a point in going bigger than 2-inch for that one. But with those new units, the full 20-foot system will probably run about 1 CFS, which is about 400 gallons a minute, with proper piping on the inside. So I started off at a couple gallons a minute here and there, and we're up to 400 now. So with small municipal scale. Let's see, we'll jump past that. You guys have seen that manganese oxide. This is another system I built for Phillips mushrooms a couple years ago to degrade wastewater from their systems. We had big issues with oil and grease. So right now I'm building a series of oil and grease separators to get the oil and grease out first before they run their water through the SOBs, because at the back end of the system is an RO machine. So they were trying to reclaim all of their water. So if that gets functioning, then we'll have both the high technologies and the low technologies at this site. So it's still a struggle. I always get thrown the hardest ones, and you do what you can. Let's see, and then smaller wastewater treatment units there. I call those the tide pools. I did use them. One thing that you have to take care of is make sure you got a stink pipe. Like, no duh. So I use it for a little while, and so like, okay, this is good enough. But I didn't have the money to really do the sampling, and I was mostly just building things and trying new techniques. So the smaller one that you see there on that bottom right picture, and then the one with my dog there. The bottom right is the one with my dog is fixing everything I did wrong in the first one. So it's okay to screw things up as long as you can fix it. This is from a mining site, manganese oxides. This is where if there were rare earth elements in your water, they would be co-precipitated with this manganese oxides. Oh geez. This is you can ask me about it later. But okay, so that was the last slide. So I'll just real quick, just some of the guys that I'm working with, guys and gals. So my buddy Pete is big into seasteading, and he's taking waste plastic film, like those big marshmallow looking things for feed that you got sitting all over the fields. That material, that waste or shrink wrap, right? Shrink wrap. It's all just getting thrown out. So he's trying to find out ways to use that, and he found out that if you can if you get it hot and then mix it with sand, it becomes this very durable kind of coral like substance. So he works in plasticrete. Frank L'Italien, fell up in Quebec, is big into 3D printing. So he's essentially the lungs and surface area for different kind of planters and the like. So he's got a whole bunch of assets. Oh yeah, here's some of the things that he's been printing off and building. So grow towers and the like. Let's see, Stuart, you already met. And then Stuart's thing is, so he's the structural components. He's the skin and the bones, so to speak. So Stuart spent 30 years in Silicon Valley as a coder, and moved back to Livingston for family. And I met him through the Mars Society. I met all these guys through the Mars Society, essentially. But the idea is, how do we build, using very cheap and accessible technologies, housing for people? Now, those two triangular looking thingies, in true scale, they're 50 feet wide. So you could put a family of, 6 to 8 in there comfortably, and my sobes would be buried underneath it. There's your wetland treatment process. So once again, it's another way to make a biodome. Here's some of there's the nodes and the like. There's Stuart and some of the other guys working together, and he's going through the process of, how do you take plywood and run it through a CNC machine and then assemble it, that it's lightweight, it's cheap, but it's incredibly strong. And boy, his big thing right now is AI teams working together. Don't get them started. Briar Fisk, then good friend of mine, and these are all good friends of mine. It's like I love my job. Is a developer for the Gaia. It's a machine learning module that will be, knows when to turn and turn off the switches or the pumps or the air relays in a biodome, such that it can also learn from its mistakes and what it's been pre-programmed with, or not programmed at all, in order to develop a sustainable system that won't crash. So this is the autonomic brain, essentially, of the system. That you don't think about your heart beating. It's just, this is what we're trying to accomplish then with an AI-based system. And let's see, to translate to plant people, then it's the autonomic homeostasis of a multicellular, multiple metabolic pathway organism. All the different plants, or the macroinvertebrates, and the people, and all the different microbes in the, your fancy Winogradsky columns, to be able to draw all of them together in such a manner that won't crash while still being completely sealed. Now, where do you get your energy? I don't know. It's kind of beyond the scope right now. It could be a small nuclear reactor, probably solar. If we're going to the moon or Mars, you would want to put one of these biological life support systems, whatever it ends up looking like, right? The idea is that we're agnostic to the shape and the form. This isn't like a Ferrari versus a Lamborghini where they have it's got to be this or it doesn't work, right? It's still just a car. It's got an engine, it looks pretty, I guess, and it's got 4 tires and it moves. It's got a purpose. Right. So we're really kind of agnostic whether you put this thing into a lava tube, heck, even in Hawaii, or in, outside of Reykjavik or something like that. And it's more about, the being able to maintain homeostasis of the environment that you've sealed in, um, while also, say on Mars, well, where are you going to get your carbon? You got to pump it out of the atmosphere. It's 5% CO2. Okay, well, that's great because now we've got the plants taken care of. Well, where are we going to get the soil? Once again, you're scraping it up off the ground, but you got to treat for perchlorates and you got to do some separation, but you can make soil out of that. You can bootstrap the rest of the way. So if you have enough energy, right? Once again, fly a brick if you've got enough power, enough energy. But the idea is to harness the biology to give unique products at very low energetic thresholds. They're doing it for peanuts, essentially, because you don't want to be able to. You don't want it where if you've only got 10 kilowatts in your portable nuclear reactor that you sent up on SpaceX or something like that, one of their machines. You don't want everything being dedicated to. 1 second, I've got to turn the furnace off. Just got to remember to turn it back on. It's cold out there. You don't want to have to dedicate all of your energy to one certain thing. You want to be as efficient as absolutely possible. And the best way to do that is through biology. But yeah, so Wayne, I guess that's everything. We're coming up onto the hour. I just get talking.
I apologize, Colin. We lost our internet here about 10 minutes ago, so I was
Son of a bitch. That's okay.
I'm glad it didn't knock you guys off, but you and Mark and the rest of the crew were all on. But I just jumped back on just now, and I'm not sure.
Okay.
So anyway, I apologize, but I missed a little bit. I do have let's see what the audience has question wise, and then I've got just one at least question I want to start with.
Sure, we got 5 minutes if we're staying into it.
We're good. It's only 2:47 I have, so
yeah, they said it was an hour. Yeah, I mean we got squished.
We're good. Mark, do you see any questions there through the audience?
Yes, I see a couple of questions.
Alicia. Oh, thank you very much, Felicia. I'm just now seeing the chat now. Sussex County. Oh, yeah. Sweet.
So she has a question about biodome. Is that including? Actually, she's defining the biodome.
Yeah, don't worry about all of Alicia's comments. So look for questions while you're doing it. I'll ask. Colin, I asked you this 7 years ago, but has any regulatory agency at any level approved a septic permit with someone using a manufactured wetland or a bioreactor yet? Because they haven't out here in the West. So
I mean, there's the composting toilets, the offsite system. Nobody's done specifically the way I'm doing it. So I'd say no. For us to get that through, to get it to be able to be commercializable for at least this specific product, and there's broad acceptance because obviously septic tanks, right? But septic tanks require a leach field, right? So if you can get something that is an active process as opposed to a passive process here, where the water just goes through the septic tank, you settle out your solids as much as you can. You get some biological reactions, but you don't have the surface area as we have in the SOBs. And then that water, after it's settled, as much of the material out as you can, it goes out to your leach field. So a system like this could eliminate the leach field. But in Pennsylvania, that requires it is permitted, of course, as it should be. We're talking about, human waste. So to be able to get to that next stage, we would do it's an experimental permit through DEP. And it's one I've looked at in the past too. And just, we can go through the process, but I got to have somebody buy the first unit. And it's just kind of one of those deals where, like, look, if nobody's willing to jump on it, there's only so much I can do. Now, at the one system that I'd showed you there, it's Phillips Mushrooms in Westchester area of Pennsylvania. It's outside of Philly. We did see degradation of fecal coliforms, suspended solids, did really well. We pulled out a lot of material. Iron and aluminum came out. We were watching sulfate. Not a whole lot happened to sulfate, but it shouldn't because it's an aerobic system. You know, we're not degrading it to hydrogen sulfide. But once again, we had the oil and grease. That was the issue that stopped that system from moving past the 5 or 6 or 7 something data points that we had, or data sets, I should say. Being a good scientist, I've got to be able to say, it's like, well, was that just co-precipitation of the sticky factor of the oil and grease pulling that material out? Or was that a biologically active process? So, statistically speaking, it wouldn't survive the statistics. And I can't honestly say exactly what was doing it, because we got to get the oil and grease out first so that we can run cleaner water through to actually show the degradation of the fecal coliforms, like you would expect in any other wastewater treatment system. Like at the tail end of most water treatment plant, municipal treatment plants is our wetlands, right? So but can you do it in a much smaller space that doesn't require several acres worth of wetlands? And that's one of those questions. So it's one of those ones where it's a damn good question. That's something that does need to happen, though, because if we can get through, like I go by the California model. If we can get it done in Cali, you can do it anywhere in the world because their regulations are so strict. It's the same thing with their auto markets, where they're the leaders of that technology because they're just the toughest, and they're such a huge market. Oh, go ahead.
Stop for a second. Let Marcus look through. Alicia's got some great questions, I guess. So go ahead, Mark. Ask whatever there was there.
No, actually, she has she's just defining biodome and
Her don't have her definitions. Questions, Mark. Read a question.
okay. No, I'm going to the question. So it starts with a definition. It ends with a question. So that's why she has a definition for a biodome, and then she goes into a question, which is okay. So if I don't read the whole thing, she just says, these structures manage temperature, humidity, and lighting to sustain ecosystem ranging from tropical rainforest to deserts. Any thoughts?
Let's here it is. Okay, so info. Yeah, that's essentially what we're trying to do with we're calling it the Gel 5 Bliss. John Edward Lennox was my dad, and he's a professor over at the campus. Penn State Altoona, and that was his email, Gel 5. So we're designing our own biosphere too, essentially, with different techniques and components. And as you have listed, Alicia, thank you. These are all things. Yeah, humidity and lighting are all concerns. Heat transfer and accumulation within the system is certainly something you have to be careful of. When you're relying on conductivity versus convection for your bleeding off heat. That's a big one at the ISS, and that's why they've got those big radiator fins. So, and heat obviously goes right back to humidity. And where's your heat coming from? It's your lighting sources. So yeah, those are all really good points. And for the Bliss 5 or the Gel 5 facility that we're building, we're going to have all of the heat sources. So it's a warehouse, and then it's 100,000 cubic feet of space divided up among maybe 15 or 20 rooms that researchers will then rent to run their own experiments in this controlled atmosphere and water system. And that all of the lights, all of the heat energy isn't just coming off of the light. Like if you use an LED, it's a lot less light than you would say high pressure sodium, like if you've got a really sophisticated cannabis grow. But you still have all your ballasts, or the things that are allowing for the energy flux to keep the lights on. You keep those outside of the room. Same thing with in this facility, all of the technical stuff will be built onto the outside of the facility, and then it'll be just the sealed welded plastics, and then all the grow space inside to keep that as available for trophic uptake and the like, just growing plants to produce oxygen, and then people breathe, and it's another form of biosphere too. But we feel that we've got some advantages, and we can do it for a hell of a lot cheaper than what they had done their system for. That place is beautiful. It's like a grand edifice.
Let's
But
go to, let's go to one more here. It's a great question from her, but I also want to go to Jeffrey first. We've had one of our amazing speakers that's been with us before, Jeffrey, that's asking some questions, and one of them is related to what Alicia just asked. Do you think, this is your opinion, don't voice somebody else's, is living on Mars possible?
Absolutely.
So, is it also practical?
I mean, practical. To say that we did it, yeah, I mean, that's about the best we can do, because there's no actual point to do it other than saying you can. Because what do we need from Mars? Like, there's no material. It's like that whole idea about the that $100 trillion asteroid. It's like, well, first, can you even get to it? And what's the point when we're not even properly recycling everything that we have on our own planet, right? Like, it's will, it's not technology. Is the way I look at it. And yeah, can we live on Mars? I believe we can, but I'm the first to really come up with the idea of to really know what a Winogradzki column does. And I actually just met another space researcher who knows Winogradzki columns, and it's the first one I've ever met. That's which is a bummer, because it shows that what to me seems like the critical technology is just been around for 120 years and nobody had ever heard of it. It's like a classroom curiosity, unfortunately. And the same thing for my dad. He had it sitting in his lab for 20, 30 years while he was at Penn State Altoona. But nobody ever figured out a practical application until you put it on the side and you use it as a flow-through reactor, and you can vent it off, and then you can also pull out all the materials that are collecting within it by just flushing individual units. Turn the water off, flush that unit. There's all your manganese oxides. That didn't exist. So I believe it can, because I have unique knowledge and experiences that are backed by good science. So now, whether it's smart to do it, I don't know. I'm just trying to save people on here on Earth. And I just love Mars, the concept. So it's more like a framing science fiction fun thing to do good for right here.
So Jeffrey also says that he served on a American Wastewater Association constructed wetland innovation grant panel.
Excellent. Great.
Jeff, if you've got a second, either unmute, and Mark can unmute you. Tell us what some of summary results from that panel were.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, I've added Jeffrey. So if he wants, he can unmute.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was amazing. Most of it went over my head, which is
Thanks.
Wonderful, because I rarely go to a presentation where I'm totally lost. So I take that as a real positive. So thank you. The panel
Thanks.
that I was on was looking at innovative technology 10 years ago, and the technologies was so primitive by comparison to what you're describing. So it's exciting to see that there's been so much progress.
Were there any of the conclusions of that panel that you can see that had value up till today?
Unfortunately, I was at US EPA at the time, and I left the agency before the projects were finished, because they were three-year projects generally. So I don't know what the eventual outcomes were.
Okay, cool. And then you also asked maybe a little bit more about Mars. So why don't you ask your questions about Mars? Alicia got to ask hers.
Oh, actually, my question wasn't about Mars. It was more about the technology that you've described. It sounds like there's vast applications. You touched on acid mine reclamation, wastewater treatment, I guess, for industrial or commercial or even residential. And then you talked about terraforming on Mars. So am I correct in you saying that this is an incredibly adaptive technology?
Yeah, because you're just giving the microbes that have been evolving for the last 4.3 billion years a place to do their thing in a sequence that allows them to sort themselves out, which then means basically do everything you could possibly want. That's a standing hypothesis. Now, when I say standing hypothesis, I'm not trying to be all super salesman or anything like that. I've screwed these systems up. I've been successful more times than I've screwed them up, but there's still a lot to learn. Like I said, manganese oxide has been one of the big ones. The other stuff is easy. But all of my systems have thus far been aerobic systems, and that we're only just now to the point using those weldable plastics with the right equipment, the right tools. And I now have a shop about a mile from my house here, which is great, where I can just basically play and just do my thing and organize everything and have plenty of space to be able to build, 4 or 5 of these things at once. With a team so that I could have employees. I just need the jobs. You can't get the job unless you have the wherewithal and the experience, and you got to build one to take pictures to show people this is what I'm going to sell you. So it's like always you're constantly stuck behind the R&D, cart before horse, where you need the money to be able to build them, but to build them you need the money to build the prototype. Which is a difficult, I carry side jobs, and, I learned construction because it pays well, and then it helps me put in my systems anyway. But yeah, that's how I've been funding this thing for the last 7 years, Wayne, since last time we talked. It's just make shit happen, because the data don't lie. But there's more to learn.
Figure out ways to
help you. If I may, may I just ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Please.
Yeah. When I was at the US EPA Office of Water for about 10 years, and before that in the regional office in New York City, and we would have people come in constantly with their technology proposals. And so often these were researchers who would be basically doing bench scale work, and really it was a heartbreaker, because they had such great ideas, but they didn't have any idea how to go from maybe bench scale, demonstration scale to commercialization. And it was a heartbreaker to listen to these people talk about their wonderful ideas, but they just had no idea how to get to commercialization.
Yeah, and it's a lot harder than you think. Alicia, thank you. I actually know a couple of these people. I've worked Bob Hedden, Robert Cadleck. Cadleck and Wallace wrote Treatment Wetlands, which is my Bible. I'm looking for... Oh, Jeff Skousen. Huh, okay, yes. All right, I know a bunch of these people. Let's see who. John Murtha. Oh, yeah, that was our senator. Yeah, and the ones that I know on here are the actual researchers. And Jeff I'm sorry, guys, for context, or everybody who's listening, the handbook of constructed wetlands is here, that Alicia shared. Thank you again, Alicia. And I just figured I'd pull that up and look at it real quick. Yeah, this is a good primer. But if you really want the meat and the potatoes, pick up Bob Hedden's Mine Water. And now he only wrote 10% of that book, but it's a really great book. And then also Cadleck and Wallace Wetlands Second Edition, Treatment Wetlands Second Edition. And those are excellent resources, and they are the ones on PDF. It's like 700 something pages long. I got it sitting right over here. It's on my desk. But Alicia, thank you very much. Yeah, this is a good primer to get you started for treatment wetlands, at least for mine drainage. Although they're saying everything here, so that's cool. Yeah, right on. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, everybody, this has been awesome. I knew it would be. I wish I wouldn't have lost my internet for about half an hour there, but I did hear most of it. And then, Alicia, you're awesome as always. Jeffrey, thank you so much. And anyone else in the audience, we appreciate you. We'll have a replay up in a day or so. And we're going to get you back sooner than 7 years from now, Colin. And let's work our butts off and get some funding for this guy. This is important stuff. So that he doesn't have to do construction work. Instead, he can work on this full time. Well,
not that I minded, but yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for showing up. And I just shared my email if anybody wants to shoot me an email.
Yeah,
and
there we go.
It's also ecoislandsllc.com. Webpage is pretty nice.
All right.
Fun.
Well,
Oh,
there we
oh, look
go.
at that guy. Oh man, yeah. Well, here's a little longer. That was
Well,
2018.
when you've got you got the beard a little more under control than this one here. So
Yeah. Oh, you should have seen it 3 days ago. Yeah. No, I'm usually rolling down around in here.
all right. Well, everybody, thank you
Cool.
so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Wayne.
We'll see everybody next week where we have Aaron for a guest on Friday, just on the same time slot. And then I'll be doing the series on AI for environmental sciences and consultants on Thursday. So everybody,